T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. Neil Armstrong just reported back. It's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Power clear.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Bullpen. As always, I'm James Roy, and with me is Tom Chavarria. Tom, how are you doing today? There's a lot to talk about.
As a Texan fan, I'm excited. As a Rockets fan, I'm frustrated. As an Astros fan, I'm hopeful. And as a Dynamo fan, I'm hopeful. That's where I'm
glad we've got a pulse on every single one. We have to do it now. Every episode this offseason, we have to talk about everything that's going on in Houston sports. I mean, the Astros at spring ball, I feel about the same as them as I have pretty much the whole offseason. I don't know. The Dynamo, I'm sad they don't have a game this weekend. I think the result against LAFC was made worse by one questionable red card and the other a necessary red card. I think that that result with what happened in terms of officiating, I thought was impressive. It didn't really give me a lot to be down on at this point. I still feel pretty good about that team. And the Rockets, man, it felt like Reed Shepherd was really going off. It felt like everyone was gelling, and managed to get back in that game. Just to lose it in overtime was a little frustrating. And then, we already got a comment on Instagram. Are we negative now? I wouldn't say so. I think I've been pretty consistently positive, but I mean, I don't know. I have been negative at points. I was very negative right after we got eliminated in the playoffs, but I'm back. I've rebounded. I've had time to think about what all is going on with this team. But let's get into the Texans talk. There's, like I said earlier, a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on with this team. We'll start with the most recent stuff that literally just broke like 30 minutes ago, and a couple hours before that. But the restructures and extensions are starting to happen. The Texans have freed up approximately $22 million in cap space between restructuring Derek Stingley, as was reported, and extending Danielle Hunter. They got another year out of that deal. I love what they're doing with Danielle Hunter. Keep giving him another year until it becomes apparent that he doesn't deserve another year. I mean, I think it's a beautiful plan. Keeping Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. together as long as possible is a winning formula, in my opinion. But how do you feel about those two moves? Is there anything you feel in terms of like how those affect? To me, it feels like, you know how people say like rich people have like unrealized gains. Like Elon Musk is like, I own Twitter and those shares are like unrealized gains or whatever. I feel like the Texans and the salary cap in general is like rich people's unrealized gains. And this is them going, okay, we're making a withdrawal. It is now realized. We have it. But I don't know. How do you feel about the moves?
I think they're great. I think Caserio is cooking. I think he's always done a really good job of staying in front of the curve, whether it be signing guys early, doing the whole prove it deal thing before it was cool, the 1 year prove it deal. I think he's made moves that always protect his future. He never gets into this. It's interesting and kind of ironic because he started with the team in salary cap hell. Like literally the whole Deshaun thing. Laramie had a bad contract. There were bad contracts everywhere. And all he's done since he's been here is kind of stayed ahead of the game all the time. All right, we're going to sign our people before everyone else signs their people, and we're going to get good friendly deals. We're going to extend where we need to extend. We're gonna restructure where we need to restructure. And I feel like the salary cap is never an issue. You always like to say that the salary cap isn't real, and I think that's his statement, right? So I guess to that end, it's kind of that way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I trust Nick Caserio with that stuff, and a lot of people have analyzed where the Texans are at in terms of their cap numbers, and like it's not just this season. Like over the next few seasons, the Texans have a lot of really accessible money. So the balance sheet was negative going into this offseason. To answer Gio Escobar's question, he said, "Are we negative now?" He was talking about the cap space. The Texans are positive on the books in the cap. I would say the only reference I have is that Texans cap and then Houston Stressens are both guys that are tracking it. And last I saw, like I said, I think Texans cap said 22 mil was freed up, and before the Daniil Hunter deal was factored into the numbers, I believe that that Houston Stressen's calculator had us at like 7.6 mil in positive cap space. So there's money to work with, and there's other moves the Texans can make this season. I think they're pointing towards restructuring. I believe Nico Collins, extending a couple of other players, and extending Daniil Hunter doesn't take away money. I think it moves money around into the future. One person who's commented on it a lot is Cody Stutes, who's like, "Oh, I thought we were gonna invest in O-line after making these moves. It doesn't look likely." And a lot of people are pointing to him like, "Well, we just freed up 14 million in cap," but he, I think, is analyzing the 2027 number and thinking that any offensive lineman that we sign is going to want a significant chunk of that number. If we're looking at an experienced guy who's asking for the market rate at his position. So in that case, in his mind, and I don't have I'm going based off what Cody Stute said. What it sounds like is he thinks that that's an indicator that the Texans will likely be bargain bin shopping again, and maybe looking to use the draft to, create potential with the offensive line, which I don't hate, but I do think that you need to sign at least. You already got Trent Brown back. We'll segue into that in a second, but you need to get at least one veteran on the inside. I feel like is the general consensus. I wouldn't want to see another year where a Laken Tomlinson type is the guy that they decide to shove into that position. But I do think that the guy they bring in should be someone who they think a rookie that they draft can reasonably overtake over the course of the season. I'd say like Wyatt Teller is I would say someone who I view as that guy, in my opinion, based off where he's kind of progressing in his career. But let's get into the signings. So the Texans signed Trent Brown. They re-signed also a special teams cornerback. The name is slipping my mind right now, but they've made some minor moves trying to keep guys off the market. But the Trent Brown signing, I think, is the biggest move they've made in terms of guys that are supposed to leave the roster or go into free agency in the coming days, being able to get them back on the roster. How big of a deal do you think it is that the Texans got Trent Brown back for another year?
The one thing that I heard today that I did not know, I guess I didn't really put two and two together. They won every start that Trent Brown started last year,
7-0,
including the playoffs. So, I mean, if nothing else, that kind of says he's kind of a big deal.
I think it sets a precedent though. So like if you remember in the playoffs, Trent Brown was injured in the playoffs, and there was the thought, the way it was advertised was that he was close and that it was kind of his call on if he played. And if that holds true, if there's reason to believe that Trent Brown playing against the Patriots could have been the difference and then he didn't, it raises questions of how close was he really to playing? Was it ever something that was likely to happen? And if it was really hey man, medical staff says you're good, do you want to go? And he said, I'm not really feeling it. Like, that's a whole nother thing. But my brother-in-law is a Patriots fan, so he has extensive experience with like Trent Brown being his guy, and that's kind of the vibe that he said is put out. Trent Brown, when he is playing, is it. He is the guy. He is amazing. The question is, are you winning or not? Because if you're not winning, that's when Trent Brown can be a little less than awesome. So the Texans were winning when he was playing. He looked really good. I like the move. I view it the same as the interior. I mean, I think at least one of the two tackle spots and guard spots is going to be a veteran who should have someone behind him applying pressure to take that job either this year or the next. And so I think that a lot of people might not like this point of view, but it's shaping up very much so that this Texans team could be carrying a veteran offensive line into this season, and a lot of they could be spending high draft capital on players that may or may not start week one across the offensive line. And I think once you move out of the first round, like in the first round, they could take a tackle maybe that challenges Trent Brown for right tackle, or they could take, if they traded up, maybe the guard out of Penn State, maybe they take him, or like a really good guard. And I could see that guy maybe potentially starting, but I could also see, obviously free agency hasn't played out. It's about to, we'll get our answer, but I could easily see a situation where this Texans team is literally setting it up to where rookies are taking over midseason. And to that effect, I think it brings up a point. Someone posted the stat today. The Texans lineup that saw the field most of the time on the offensive line was only there for 27% of the total snaps of 2025. And this was the most, so it wasn't guaranteed to be their best, but it was their best lineup. The Texans' best offensive line, which consisted of Ariante Ursary, Titus Howard at guard, Jake Andrews, and then Ingram and Brown. That was their best offensive line. It only saw the field for like 27.94% was the exact percentage at the time. I would expect, and one of the things that happened one of the reasons of many that was the case was that the Texans had in mind who they wanted to be starting for the early parts of the season, and they stuck with that until injuries forced them to make a realignment that ended up working really well. And so I would say this year you're kind of setting up for a similar vibe where like Cole Popovich and Nick Caley are going to decide who they think is the best offensive line going into the season, and it's probably going to be vet heavy. And then we'll see either injuries or common sense prevail at some point to reshuffle the offensive line, and it'll probably hit its stride in the middle of the season. So I'd be prepared for it now. I think a lot of Texans Twitter is going to be very toxic and volatile those first few games as the offensive line is trying to figure it out. Because that's to be expected. They're making a huge shuffle at that position. They have 2 starters returning from last season, 3 technically, but I think they've made it clear they want to make an upgrade at center. I would expect that group to be at least 3 offensive linemen that have not started for the Texans before, when all is said and done. But with that, there's some other shuffles that have happened. We kind of talked about it last week, but it's been made official that Jerry Shaplisky is going to be taking over as the Texans quarterbacks coach. Gerard Johnson's out. I believe he accepted a position in Philly instead of going to A&M, as was kind of being reported on and looked like kind of a sure thing at that point. Are your feelings any different on Shaplisky coming in, what he brings to this team?
I think it's still too soon. I don't necessarily know enough about him other than that little excerpt that's out there. Can't remember who the quarterback was that was talking about him. But I mean, until him and CJ get together, maybe it's a good fit. Maybe they have to kind of grow together. Maybe we never hear about it at all.
Yeah, to me, like you said, we need to see it play out, but the big thing is going to be he's got a lot of experience coaching and he's from a similar background. Nick Caley came in and basically took over the same offensive staff for all intents and purposes that Bobby Slowick had, and has kind of slowly picked it apart, made some changes and put guys in positions that are more his guys. So this will be the first season where we see him with his guys on his staff running his offense. And I expect there to be significant improvements. I mean, I think that's reasonable in year two with what this defense brings to expect this team to make major steps on offense. To speak to making major steps on offense, I guess we'll get into the next thing. The Texans made a couple of trades this past week. First and foremost, and I'll get to your question here on Instagram. Daniel Lamelli is asking, should we re-sign Ed Ingram? I think this discussion is very important to that. What are your thoughts on Titus Howard being traded away for a 5th round pick, just in general? Like, what are your thoughts on that move?
I think once it was clear that he was looking for more money and you weren't going to pay the number that he thought he was going to command, it was smart to move him. Again, Nick Caserio getting out in front of potentially losing a guy for nothing, because you see it all across the league right now. A lot of people are releasing guys to try to get out of this money that they didn't want to spend. And if you can do that, if you can trade it and get, I know people were like, what, a 5th round pick? He's worth more than that, this and that. If you can get anything for a guy, you see it in baseball all the time. Kyle Tucker trade, for example. The Astros knew they weren't going to be able to pay him. So they turned around and traded him, got Isaac Paredes, got Hayden Wesneski, got Cam Smith, and now you have tools to keep going, as opposed to losing Kyle Tucker for nothing like the Cubs did. So it's smart for Nick Caserio to try to find out what these guys are going to want, see if he can keep them in the building. If he can't keep them in the building, get them out before, they're in a situation where they lose them for nothing.
Yeah, and I think so to speak on the compensation point, right? I think that a huge talking point was Titus Howard for a 5th round pick. That seems awfully low. And at face value, yeah, that's true. And even I fell into that discussion. I was like, yeah, 5th round pick. The Texans essentially, and I know this isn't how the real world works, right? And we'll talk about this next trade in a second. But if you look at the trades they made that day and you lump them together, the draft compensation basically amounted to a pick swap where they moved from 128 to 139. So that they did trade away a 4th round pick and they got a 5th round pick in return that was literally 11 picks after and is basically at the top of the 5th round. So it's, I don't like using the basically a 4th round pick thing. We have that discussion about early 2nd round picks and late 1st round picks, but it's tough to be mad when you look at the context of it and you see that the return on Titus Howard was closer to a 4th round pick than I think a lot of people would, assumed right off the bat. Now, looking at what Titus Howard was, yeah, Titus Howard was flexible. He played a lot. He was a very important contributor to the Texans. But the other side of it is that I reckon that the trade compensation or the trade package to the Browns, which has been pretty commonplace in deals that we make with the Browns, that the player we're sending requires assurances of an extension of a certain amount. And it's funny that Titus Howard literally, anyway, that's a whole nother thing with Deshaun Watson and stuff, but him and Titus Howard and Laramie Tunsil were pretty good friends with Deshaun Watson. I don't know how those friendships progressed when he left and with all that happened, but I reckon that he's probably excited to be back playing with Deshaun because, all else aside, he's probably, probably still keep up with each other. I can't blame him for that. I mean, as a fan of the Texans, I don't like it, but looking at it, a 5th round pick, that's basically a 4th round pick for a player that's going to jump up, because Titus Howard, as it stood, was already making, I think it was like 6th highest paid guard and 8th highest paid tackle. The jump in pay takes him way up there. He's going up to one of the highest paid, whatever the Browns are going to use him as. Their O-line, very similar to ours. They've torn it pretty much all apart. So who knows? They might view him as a tackle, guard. Maybe they'll ask him to snap the ball. I don't even know at this point. But for what they've up and paid him, he is top 5 in both categories. And I would expect that, understanding that was part of it. Yeah, the compensation was never going to be, I don't know how high Texans fans even thought that it was going to get. I got frustrated with a 5th round pick, but then I'm thinking to myself, maybe 4th is as high as it gets. Like, I don't know. Couldn't really make sense of what would be sensible compensation. But speaking of sensible compensation, the Texans also made another trade on the same day, 4th round pick and Juice Scruggs for David Montgomery. How do you feel about the move, just overall? Let's hear
I
it.
love it. I love it. I don't understand where so many people were upset with the compensation. They thought that the Texans overpaid for David Montgomery. They looked at his age and like, oh my God. And we just traded for, Joe Mixon 2.0. I saw all these crazy comments. And when you break it down, Dave Montgomery has more tread on the tires than someone his age. If you compare him to Joe Mixon, when Joe Mixon came in, he's got less carries, less yards, all that. Um, and people that are upset with they sent out Juice Scruggs. Where was Juice Scruggs really going to play? Like, if you thought that was going to be a part of the line, I feel for you because I don't see anywhere for Juice Scruggs in this, with the draft and talking about spending money to go get some guys. He's going to be fighting for a reserve role, in my opinion. I'm totally okay with cutting him loose.
Yeah, there's a few things. Once again, a lot of people were hung up on that 4th round pick. Like I said earlier, that 4th round pick is literally 11 picks in front of the pick they got back for Titus Howard. So they basically, the Titus Howard news broke first. So they basically ensured they got that pick back and then sent it away for, and another part that people have talked about, has been reported on and confirmed by the Broncos beat, is that the Texans had a 5th round pick in their offer for David Montgomery. And as word broke of that, the Broncos came in and offered more. And so the Texans had to up their offer. So there's that. As far as the age question goes, David Montgomery is 8 years in the league, 28 years old. Woody Marks is 1 year in the league and 25 years old. By the time he is 28 years old, he will have half the experience that David Montgomery has. Jawar Jordan is 26. In 2 years, he will be the same age that David Montgomery is now. People will use the age thing as a wear and tear thing. It means that David Montgomery is more experienced and has more of a track record at the pro level of producing at a high level. And like you said, he's been sitting in the shadows of Jahmyr Gibbs for the past 3 seasons, getting basically, like, I would say that based off of his production, it was really good, but he's like an old person's car that person has driven 5,000 miles a year for several years now. And you're like, how in that world is a 2001 F-150 on the market with 50,000 miles? And it's like, oh, because my grandpa lives on a mountain and just drives 5 miles down and 5 miles back, and that's it. And so it just doesn't get any use, but it has shown that it's capable. We all know what a Ford F-150 is, one of the best selling trucks in the world ever. So, I mean, I think that it's a really good move. It fits what the Texans need to do. And the other part of it is that David Montgomery doesn't need to be everything and the end all be all for the Texans for several years. He needs to be what the Texans need right now. The Texans have showed over the course of last season that this defense is Super Bowl caliber. They've shown that this offense needs to be able to run the ball and needs to have an offensive line that needs to improve somewhat on pass blocking and needs to be able to block for whatever running back they bring in. They're very clearly addressing those two things. And whether it's this draft or next, I know Tom and I both really like Mike Washington because, spoiler alert, both of our mock drafts that we're going to show at the end of the episode feature him. But Mike Washington Jr. out of Arkansas is a guy you bring in. His literal scouting report is like guy who could sit behind a running back and be ready to be the guy next season. Like, that's like literally what he is. And he's young. You get him in there and all those questions about age and stuff to me are like, okay, well, what is David Montgomery doing right now? Because he just needs to do what he's been doing for the past 8 seasons, like once or twice more. Not really asking a whole lot of him. And then to speak to Juice Scruggs getting sent away, my only comment on that is that there was a Bengal YouTube or something like that. Some big YouTuber for NFL content posted saying the Texans have gotten rid of 3 starting offensive linemen over the past 2 off seasons, and I took issue with that statement because he lumped Juice Scruggs in as a starting offensive lineman, and I'm like, he has started for the team, but right now he's a backup offensive lineman. And I maybe that's like, autism is a spectrum. Everyone's on it, and I think that maybe my autistic bit is is caring really much about that specific part of that tweet, because it was not a wrong tweet at all, but I really locked in on that. Juice Scruggs, just the frustrating part about him is that he was drafted in the second round, meant to be heir apparent at center and fix a problem for this team, and he didn't. He's one of, I think, the poster children for Nick Caserio. You should let anyone else but you draft the offensive lineman for this team. That and Kenyon Green. Hey, they can't all be zingers. He's hit on Ariante Ursary. Blake Fisher is still on the roster, as is Jarrett Patterson. I don't know, man. If Juice Scruggs is what the Lions said, we're losing our center to retirement or whatever, we need a center, and we said, well, we got Juice Scruggs, and they said that, I'd be like, okay, cool, you can have him. Send him your way. We'll take David Montgomery. That's the important part. So to speak to the trade, getting David Montgomery is the most important part of that. And age, compensation, all of that is secondary. I think I tweeted it like right after it happened. I said, it's going to be really hard to argue about the value that was paid for this running back when the value shows itself on the field. So, it's tough to be mad about the move. I don't have any issues with it personally. But yeah, the Texans are setting up really good for this offseason, looking to be in a good spot. And I'm excited because I think over the course of this next week, we're going to get a lot more clarity on what the Texans are looking to do in the draft. Before we look into our mock drafts, I do have a question for you. Maybe a little off topic, but it's on topic. It's just not 100% Texans. But what are your thoughts? There's been a recent trend I've seen where a lot of people are suggesting that the draft should be moved to the beginning of the offseason before free agency. Does that make any sense to you? Because I can see it from both sides, but I'm wondering what your perspective is on that.
To me, I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It's okay. Do you want them to draft for need after free agency, kind of like they do now? Or do you want them to draft first and then hope they can fill needs in free agency, and you'll be upset because they didn't go out in free agency and make moves after the draft? I think the way it's set up is probably the best way it needs to be. You make your swings at free agency. If you don't get it, now you have the draft and you have clear needs, even though Nick Caserio doesn't believe in needs. For everyone else that does, you can now address them in the draft with young talent. I guess with the flip flop, you're really worried that, okay, I need free agency to fix whatever I don't fix in the draft.
Yeah, for me, I think it makes a lot of sense to make the switch, mainly because you can't control what other teams are going to do, but you can control you. In the draft, controlling you is making the pick where you think makes sense. But for example, I noticed in your mock draft that you took Mike Washington Jr. at 69, which is nice. That's where I wanted to take him in mind too. But I ran that mock like 10 times, and every single time at pick 66, the Titans took him. And so obviously in a mock draft, I can run it again and I can trade up and I can go get Mike Washington Jr. But if your whole offseason plan hinges on, we set up the running back position this way, we want to take Mike Washington Jr., he's the only guy that fits what we need, and we need to get after him, and you've done free agency already, there's no going back. Like the Texans finding out that Joe Mixon was injured after everything had happened, and it's like, well, now I guess we just have to sign Nick Chubb, whereas they might have been more aggressive with other moves at the running back position if that hadn't happened. So looking at it, if you move the draft over, then the draft falls the way it does. You can't really control what other teams do. Someone could trade in front of you, whatever. If you're in free agency and someone outbids you, that's your fault, because you set up your cap the way you did. You have money. If you don't have enough money to pay the player, that's on you. But if you wanted to pick a player and everything about your board said his value was this pick, and you were there and some other team trades in front of you, there's no amount of money you can pay to overcome that. They're on the clock now. They're going to take the player that they thought you were going to pick. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, but I can see the logic. And as someone, if I was, who's the guy at the top? I don't recognize him. Hey, Garrett, what's up? It's James. But I think it's a lot easier if I was a GM, I would want the draft to happen first, because I would want to know how my draft board fell so I can allocate money the way that I need to. Like, you know, for example, if free agency happens after the draft last season and the Texans know that Joe Mixon can't go, they can meet or beat on Saquon Barkley. Or was that last year? Was that that was last year. They can get up and make it happen with Saquon. Whereas I think they were like, oh, it's close, but like we've got, we'll, or no, that was the year before. They're like, we'll just trade and get Joe Mixon, right? So like, if it goes a different way, if they go into the draft and they had plans to like get a running back in the draft and it doesn't happen, they can like go all out and be like, well, now we have to get Saquon. It would feel like settling to do anything else. I don't know. That's not an exact mirror. I'm just trying to give a situation that makes sense of my argument. I don't think it should change. I think it's fine the way it is. But if I was a GM, I could see how I would want the flow of the offseason to go that way. It would make a lot more sense to me. We got a couple of comments to look at. Stressens is in the chat. It says, miss you guys. I miss you too. We're going to have to get you on the show. I don't know, maybe draft time, or you'll probably be at the draft. So
I know, right? Him and Dick are hanging out later. So what?
Are you Houston Stressens or are you Mr. Worldwide? Because you're just everywhere, dude. And then on Instagram, we have someone who's asking, do you think they extend CJ Stroud this offseason? And Tom, I'll let you go first. What do you got?
I do not. I don't know that there's a number that David Mulligetta will be comfortable with, that the Texans will be comfortable with this year. I would think there's a gap right now. That's just me.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's some whispers in my ear, talking in circles about how this goes down with people, and the general consensus right now is that the Texans likely won't do anything. I mean, if I'm the Texans, right, and this is a discussion we've had out before, but I'll bring it back up. The number that would make CJ Stroud the 12th highest paid player in the league is about 50 to 52 mil, right above Kyler Murray, who now I guess isn't on that list because he's cut, but. That to me is like, if somehow Mulligetta said we'd rather have the money now, we'll do the extension at 50, 52, even 53. I'm like, oh yeah. And anything 55 or below, realistically, based off how the market moves, is a huge win for the Texans. But I don't think that he goes for any less than Dak numbers at this point, because that's the kind of quarterback that he and Mulligetta think that he is. So, I mean, and I hope he is, because I'd gladly... You've seen it this offseason with Will Anderson Jr. If you are that guy, write a blank check, put it in the mail and say, hey, here you go. Whatever number you see fit, put on it, and we will pay you that, because that's what you're worth. So, yeah. I think that CJ Stroud's extension is not likely this offseason, because I don't think he has the leverage that he needs to get the deal that he wants. I could be wrong, but a lot of the indicators point towards that. And these same people I'm talking to have pretty much mapped out what has happened so far this offseason, outside of like the Montgomery move to a T. So I trust it. Stressens, we'd love to have you on soon, every Thursday night. I know you got time on Thursday nights. Maybe pop on next Thursday night. You can fill out a mock draft. We'll just go mock draft for mock draft and see what we got. Speaking of mock drafts,
I'm very tough to beat, though. I'm gonna let you know right now. My mock drafts are pretty good.
Oh yeah, honestly, Tom, we'll start with yours. I'm gonna put it on the screen right now, and I'm just gonna be honest with you. Oh wait, no, that's mine. Sorry, you guys got a little preview of mine. I'm gonna be honest with you. I wasn't the biggest fan of yours. There was parts of it I really liked, but overall, and yours graded out a lot higher than mine. Mine graded awful, but I like mine better than yours, and maybe I'm wrong for that, but we'll see. Tom, can you walk us through this logic here?
Absolutely. We know Nick Caserio likes to make trades. I looked at what I had available to me in the first round. There was nothing. There was nothing there for me, so I traded back, got the guard that everybody feels like the Texans are going to get in Pregnon. I've seen him mocked. I've seen him talked about a ton. It just seems like it's destined to happen, which means it won't, but I still took him anyway. Next go around, still did not have anyone at 38 that I was like, gotta have. And I know the Aggie hate. As a Longhorn fan, I'm with you, but they can't all be bad, right? One of them's got to be good. Maybe it's Chase Bizantis. Maybe he's the one good one. So I'm hoping that works there. Clearly, the Texans are going to need guards. I don't think they're going to reach for a center. The idea behind the center is he's got to be like a veteran in my mind anyway, or really skilled to be able to do like protections and stuff like that. So I think they go out and spend money on a center and draft 2 guards. The second pick in the second round, I went for a safety. I love Kalen Bullock. I love all the other secondary pieces, but you can never have enough secondary pieces. I think getting an LSU safety is never a bad thing. That's DBU for some people. So I went there. The Mike Washington pick in the third round was a tip of the cap to you because I know how much you love this guy. I've seen him talked about on Twitter a ton. I don't think it's going to happen. I really think they're set at running back. I don't see a reason to go get a running back that early. But if he's there, maybe they take him, and just best available player. He would probably be RB3, and that's really high to take an RB3, right? It's really high. Fourth round, I pulled for a tight end. He was the best available. Obviously, the tight end that everybody wants is that monster freak dude. I can't remember his name right now. Sadiq, is it? I think.
Yeah, but Kenya Sadiq at 28 is a pipe dream, honest.
Yeah, exactly. So I took a guy from Baylor. Maybe hometown cooking. You get the best version of him. That's the one thing that I did that didn't grade out well. Defensive interior is something the Texans are going to need, I think. Right now, it's kind of competitive if you believe what Aaron Wilson's putting out, which we always do. So they might be in the market for interior defensive end or defensive lineman. I'm sorry. And then I made another trade, got another tight end. I know I did not need another tight end, but he was the best available player. And you look at the tight end room, it's kind of thin. You got Brevin Jordan, you got Schultz, and then what? So maybe it goes that way, maybe not. It's tough when you've got a team kind of stacked up. You want to take players that you think could impact your roster, but you just don't know where they would do that at. So that's where I ended up.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I mean, the 2 tight ends thing was puzzling, but I do think you got it right on the second one. Between the 2, I personally really like Andres. I think he grades pretty well as a run blocker. My favorite in the draft, I've spoken to him a lot, is Sam Roush, but his stock. So it's funny, after the combine, one of the biggest shifts that I noticed in the app or in the mock draft simulator is that Mike Washington had been going 4th round all the time, but they upped his grade or his ranking to 70. And so PFF likes to draft based off rankings instead of ADP. And so his ADP is still like 118, but he was going at 70. And after the first round, there's 2 running backs left. It was Jadarian Price and Mike Washington. And knowing that the Titans need a running back bad, I'm really shocked that you got him at that pick. I couldn't get him to fall down there. But I mean, I think a 3rd round pick on a running back is just adding on to the list of things that the Texans have invested in that room. And at first it seems like a lot, but when you total it up and it's like, oh, we spent a 4th round pick and then 2 3rd round picks, and we got Woody Marks, Mike Washington Jr., and David Montgomery. I think you take that every time, because there are teams that are spending 1st and 2nd round picks and not getting a return at running back. So look at the Steelers with Najee Harris, man. I really wish his time had gone better. He kind of fell off really quickly. It was wild to see it. Oh, I didn't know that. PFF's board versus everyone else's board is just so incredibly different. I think I said it the other week. I was on a show with like the draft doctor. I can't remember his name. And his mock draft simulator was based off of how Texans people have picked for the team. So the players ADP changes based off that. So like no tight ends were ranked very high at all. And there was a lot of players that were not great ranking very high on PFF that were like at the top of the list. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like having to make a very different decisions in that one as opposed to this one. And I agree with you, Brandon. I like using the different ones to get like varied results, but the PFF one to me is the cleanest look. So I like to use that one most of the time. So you're just throwing out suspicions, Stressins. Just you're just suspicious of it. But I'd believe it. I mean, I think it lines up pretty closely. So let's get into my mock draft. And I mean, I don't know. I like it a lot better, but that's because I have done what I do every season, which is when the off season starts, I start watching guys and I go, that guy needs to be a Texan, that guy. And then I form this like list of like 15 prospects that I need to see in a Texans uniform. And it's honestly, it's been interesting because the past off season or two, the Texans have drafted a couple of the guys, but usually I'm just like, oh, look, I have no idea what's going on at 6'10" in Kirby. Not any idea at all. I tinkered with the idea of trading up with the Vikings. That's been my go-to when trading up in the first round. Last time I caught a lot of flack because I said that we traded up and we only gave up the 69th pick, third round pick to move up from 28 to 18. A lot of people said that wasn't reasonable. This time I upped the compensation to the 59th pick, and then I asked for a third round pick in return. So we're moving up 10 spaces in the first round and moving back from the second round into the third round. Normally I just let PFF tell me if the trade is good or not, but I actually pulled up the value chart, and I've used that in the past to make sure that the value is comparable. And I like that Stressens already knows that Tom got absolutely destroyed in this one. But Caleb Banks falls. So the goal of this trade up was to take Vega out of Penn State. And the first time I ran it, he came up and I took him. And then the picks afterwards, I just didn't like. So I was like, oh, it'll happen again. And then every other one that I simulated after that, it never happened. He got taken like 4 or 5 picks ahead every single time. So didn't know how good I had. I feel like, I don't know if you've been seeing a lot of the discourse on like Pokemon Fire Red on the Switch just came out, and everyone's talking about playing the game, trying to find shiny Pokemon or whatever. And that's how I felt running this mock draft like 20 times to try and get the players that I wanted to fall where I wanted. But with that, another discussion point is, and it comes up here at the 38th pick, PFF has the grade that they give. I don't know what goes into it, whether it's need or the player's actual ranking relative to where they were drafted. But I've gotten a lot of flack because on this one, obviously I traded up and I got an A grade on the pick. But the other day I ran one where I took Monroe Freeling at 18, and that graded out at a C+. And someone said, trading up 10 spots to get a C+. And I was like, what? You got to go up and get your guy. So, and the comparable moment that I would look at is last year, Texans fans were like, Tyler Booker. He's totally going to fall to late in the first round and we'll take him there. And the Cowboys went at like 12 and picked him up. And if PFF throws a C grade on that, are you going to be mad about it? Because the Cowboys got a really good guard. He did really good this past season. So I don't know. I'm not putting too much weight on the grade from PFF. I'm going to get the guys I think are going to make the Texans better. So Caleb Banks, no brainer, not a lot to explain there. If you want a young, certified, just absolute beast in the defensive interior, Caleb Banks was amazing in the Senior Bowl, in the combine at Florida. Just a monster dude. Very swarmy, as Stressens has so fittingly put. Oh wait, 1 minute.
Not very
I'm starting to
swarmy.
worry that he might not be swarmy enough. Oh my gosh. Anyway, Banks, great. I like that pick. You take care of defensive interior. There are other guys that I like in the first round that are occasionally falling to 38 that I'm like, maybe I could just take that guy and get a better offensive lineman. But that was the player I liked at 18. At 28, it was just one of those things where I honestly heavily considered trading out of this pick. But then I was like, if I trade out, I don't have a place to get Dunker at. And I really wanted to get Jennings Dunker. And for anyone who doesn't already know, Dunker is, for all intents and purposes, a guard. Most people believe that he's going to make that transition. He took a lot of snaps at that position in the Senior Bowl. I'd say he's like a Titus Howard replacement because he has that versatility to play tackle. But in this case, he is being drafted to play guard, in my opinion. So you get that starting level guard there. I took 2 starting level guards and a tackle is how you should view this draft. So Dunker there, and then I trade up from 69, and I talked to this earlier. This was something where I simulated this draft like 100 times, and every single time the Titans took Mike Washington Jr. at 66. And so I traded in order to make sure that I would be ahead of the Titans so that I could take Mike Washington Jr. And I've spoken to this before as well. It doesn't change with the Montgomery addition. In fact, I think this reinforces my logic behind it. My ideal running back room is Montgomery. Now that's who they've decided is their veteran. Woody Marks, Mike Washington Jr., and Jawar Jordan. All guys that have their place, can toe the rock. I think with that, Jawar Jordan gets pushed more to a special teams role. And at that point, you're deciding between Jawar Jordan and British Brooks. So I don't know if that the tiebreaker on that may be special teams contributions. But I just really like Mike Washington, 6'2", 230 pounds, absolute monster. The last time that an absolute monster running back didn't go in the first round and got picked up by a team, the Titans drafted Derrick Henry. And everyone said, oh, look, that didn't work out for the past, for the first, 1 or 2 seasons. And then Derrick Henry became the absolute monster that we know he is today. So imagine if you drafted a guy, I don't want to say he's comparable. Mike Washington's not Derrick Henry, but you draft a guy who's a big-bodied, every down back that just gets to the luxury of sitting behind a veteran and getting to take it in and develop. In a league where development is not the priority, I need you now. I need you to do it right now. Let's give him a second, give him a couple seasons and see what he's got. Let's see. I'm going to look at the chat real quick. See, talking about Banks, a report about stopping combine because of blisters or something when he's actually being content with testing, just hearing things like that. That is, I guess, just tell us. I wouldn't blame a guy for stopping the combine just because he's content with his testing, but to try and hide it under false pretenses, concerning. But I just really like what Caleb Banks is. So I don't regret the pick. No regrets, not even a letter. Let's see. And then Keelan Rutledge. This plays into the discussion we had earlier, Tom. Dunker and Rutledge both are guys that are high potential. Definitely, I think Rutledge especially could be, but either one of them could be a starter this season in the NFL. But if you draft Rutledge in the 3rd round at 82 and you sign Wyatt Teller and you put Wyatt Teller out there to start the season, the expectation, in my opinion, is that at some point in the season, Rutledge takes over for Wyatt Teller. It wouldn't be the first time in the past season or two that Teller's been benched. So would not be surprising to see that. And then Austin Barber, I was contemplating a few picks here. So it's I think Brandon Hallam mentioned the need for safety and linebacker. And normally my go-to linebacker pick is Jacob Rodriguez. That didn't pan out. Decided to go in a different direction there. So with him not there, at that point in the draft, a guy that I like is Tarian York, but based off of where he projects to land in this simulator, I could have had him at the next pick, but the next pick is not in the 4th round. So, but that was the same case with Austin Barber. I just decided I would rather display the pick of a tackle at this point. I think it's the perfect point to do it. Barber's a guy who, once again, this is like Rutledge and Dunker are potential starters in the NFL. Barber, his issues are literally like when you look at a guy and his issue is like he fits the Texans run scheme that they're trying to do to a T. He's an excellent gap run blocker, but his scouting report says needs work in pass. If someone bull rushes him, he's taken off his feet. Is like his whole entire weaknesses section on his scouting report is like needs to be a better pass blocker. And so that's something that I think, he's a fellow Florida alum along with Trent Brown. Sitting behind Trent Brown, maybe he picks up a few things and gets to a point where he gets better and eventually takes over. That or Blake Fisher, or even Jennings Dunker. Either way, you give yourselves a lot of options when it comes to who's going to step up and eventually be the long-term tackle. And I like that a lot. So I'm really content. And this is not something I'm unfamiliar with. But Tom, once again, his mock draft is rated as the top blank percentage, and mine is the bottom percentage. So I go and get my guys. I'm really content with my mock draft, and I like it more than yours, and I'm not afraid to say it. So
well, real quick, I'll say I do like all the players you drafted. I couldn't get them. Jennings Dunker is up there for me. The entire Iowa offensive line, any one
100%.
of them, I'm here for any one of them, and I just couldn't get them. And I could have probably ran this thing 100 times, like you said, until I got the guys I wanted. I ran it once, and I took what I could get. And while I didn't get offered a trade up, I didn't force a trade up. I just kind of went through the trades that it gave me, and I picked one. If I could have traded up, I would have. And I don't know why you took another tackle. I feel like that's hard when you already have two tackles, and you're talking about Dunker, which I think is great, being that versatile guy. So you technically you have like tackle covered. So I don't know that I would have took Barber. I probably would have got the safety like they talked about. But I mean, that's kind of why I shifted away from tackles, because if you look at it, I really think unless you're after a swing tackle, you really don't want to draft one that high. You're going to be able to draft one in the fifth, sixth, seventh round. That guy can develop into your tackle of the future and pick up reps wherever, as opposed to a guy that you can't start. I feel like the first 3 rounds, those guys should be starters. And the argument against like Mike Washington is like RB3 isn't going to get a ton of run. Like if you don't think that Monty's going to get like a 2-year deal, he's probably going to get the exact same contract that Joe Mixon got. I really feel like he's not going to be like a 1 year and done like Chubb was. So any running back you take now, you're talking about 3 years. That's the only knock I got there.
Yeah, and Stressens gets it here. Dunker's likely a guard, but the other part of it is, like, I saw this discussion, I believe it was Lance Zierlein that posted about it, but a lot of times in the NFL, teams are like, this guy was a tackle at the college level, we're going to draft him and we're going to play him at tackle, when he very clearly would benefit from a move inside, and then they basically let him tarnish his career and then move him inside and go, wow, he looks really good at guard. And so, like, I think he was talking in regards to Caden Proctor out of Alabama. But I've been keeping a close eye on those conversations where like guys are like, this guy looks like he should be a guard at the pro level, because they're much like looking back at Shaq Mason, where that's a guy who like was playing really well at guard, but his knock was like arm length, and like it was always going to come back and get him. And he did pretty well his first year in Houston, and then second year just totally the wheels fell off. So I'm looking at Dunker, and the conversation around him is that he's likely a guard. So I like the potential versatility in spot situations of him to play tackle. But at the end of the day, I drafted him there. I would view him as the guy who is heir apparent to play guard. Depending on how the Texans address it in free agency, he could literally be the guy who's drafted to start at that position. But both him and Rutledge, I think the biggest problem with this Texans offensive line has been the interior. And I think that depth is a huge, an important point of emphasis. So I think that bringing in 2 guys that can start means that you have a guy that can start on your bench. Just like Jarrett Patterson, his cap hit was like 3 times Juice Scruggs' cap hit, even though he was drafted much later. And I was like, do you think the Texans move on from him to save cap? And in my mind, it's like he's been so useful as that spot guy, that like swing guard essentially, that I had trouble believing that you move on from it, especially since he can play center too. Just a lot to love from him. We do have a question in the chat. I put it up there a second ago, but thoughts on Mekhi Becton? I view him the same as Wyatt Teller, in my opinion. I know that I think I have a slightly higher view of Wyatt Teller, and most Texans fans will, even though I don't like using PFF grades. and I'll be the first to admit, like I've watched the Browns in spot. Like I haven't like watched every Browns game and analyzed Wyatt Teller as a player, but I think if there's one position where PFF grades can kind of be used to get a feel for how a player has played, it is the offensive line. It's really the main position I feel like PFF grades are probably made for, because there's no other indicators if you're not watching every single play that can kind of give you an idea. And if you trend Wyatt Teller's PFF grading, he was like top guard in the league 5 years ago, and then three and 4 years ago he was like top 10, and then the past 2 seasons he's been like 33 to 40, which there's obviously 64 guards in the league at a minimum, so that's still middle ground, but there's been a very clear and apparent fall off in his play since the 2023 playoff run that the Browns went on. And so I think that Teller's better than Becton, but I think that they would both be signed for the same purpose. What are your thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, clearly, I think you're getting the more seasoned guy, I think, in Teller, and you're hoping that you just get the last little bit out of him. Where I feel like Becton probably still has more tread on the tires, but he just hasn't shown as well, right? So just have to. I would arguably say whoever is the cheaper guy for the Texans, if that's the way it works out, maybe that's how it works out. I'm hoping we're not talking about either of them. We're talking about Jennings Dunker.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like
I couldn't get him in my draft, but I hope the Texans get him in theirs.
That's the thing, is that there's one more domino to fall. We talked about it before, where Titus Howard and how the Texans viewed him when he was potentially playing this year was a huge puzzle piece. But the other puzzle piece is Ed Ingram. It's been reported that there's mutual interest in him coming back, but I think that his number, like the report is 13 million, which based off of last offseason means we can go ahead and tack another 3 million on top of that at least. And I don't think the Texans are looking to pay that kind of money for a starting guard. And that's not because they shouldn't. I mean, I'm just kind of resigned to the fact that the Texans are going to be doing bargain bin shopping, and hopefully this offseason they actually go into the draft and pick up a guard that they think can start for them. And even Pregnon, who a lot of people are pushing into the first round slowly, is a guy who I think, even if he was drafted at 28th overall, is a guy who could potentially be seen behind a veteran for the Texans. Just, I think he fits that bill where he maybe needs to sit and watch for a second. But the other piece of the puzzle is Ed Ingram back? Because if Ed Ingram's not back, then we're counting on the Texans to sign 2 veterans to start on one side or the other, and they're also looking into a new starting center. I think at that point, you're probably looking at maybe 1 veteran on one side and bringing in a rookie to start on the other. I would love for that rookie to be Jennings Dunker. I'll go ahead and say it now. I'll put it out there. If Jennings Dunker is drafted by the Texans, that's my next jersey purchase. Like I'll go ahead and do it. I'll even get the custom one to make sure I can get it quicker. Like I'm that interested.
You gotta dye your hair red too. Just take on the whole persona.
You're giving me some really bad ideas, Tom. I might have to act on that. Either way, I think and it's funny too, because we talked earlier in the offseason about how many offensive linemen they'll probably bring in. And I just think it's going to be as many as possible. Like, I don't know. It's just going to be, if they see a guy they like, bring him in, see how it goes. But I'm excited to see, I think the prospects coming into this offseason for fixing this offensive line are a lot better than they were last offseason, even though I think both of us locked in on a certain part. Let's use this as a word of caution for the Texans on not listening to our advice. Tate Ratledge was huge on our list. It was a guy we really liked going into the draft, and the Texans could have taken him in the second round. He was on the board. He did really well over there in Detroit. Could have been a Texan and was not. So words of wisdom, words of warning, I guess, for the Texans, that Jennings Dunker is that guy for us this season. So we're going to have to see if they take him. And then Karma over on X is right. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans trade out of the first round again. I think Nick Caserio commented on the radio and was like, yeah, people might be mad, but if we trade out of the first round, but I don't know. But yeah, a lot happened this week for the Texans. So, and it's only going to get to be more because of free agency and and everything that's coming up, Stresson says only one O-line free agent you'd sign and one you'd draft. Only pick one for each. We'll end it on that, Tom. What do you got? Pick one of each.
I mean, if they're signing an offensive lineman, I hope it's Ed Ingram. I think the continuity would be there. I think that's really important. And then any Iowa lineman, I'm not just going to limit it to Jennings Dunker because they were all really good. That was like the best line in college football. So, any one of them, and go to war.
Yeah, I'll for the sake of not saying the exact same thing as you, because Jennings Dunker is up there for me, but in the draft, if I can pick one offensive lineman that I think, starting level, really good value pick, I'd like to see them take Keelan Rutledge. And then if we're going into free agency and picking a guy, a lot of there's already been the link between the Texans and Wyatt Teller, but if we're being honest, man, it's really tough to pick between these two guys, so I'll just give two names. But Joel Bitonio, the other guard from Cleveland, I think is a better fit for what the Texans do. And then Connor McGovern could be out of the price range, but but the center out of Buffalo, non-tender, going to be a free agent. And the thing is that it's funny. I just saw the comment. Do you think the Texans have a chance at signing Tyler Linderbaum? If I'm choosing between Tyler Linderbaum and Connor McGovern, I'm going with Connor McGovern because he's a better fit for what the Texans do, or at least what they're trying to do in the run game. So I think for the price, I think his price will be a little less than Linderbaum, and I think that it's probably a better investment if you're going between those two guys. Let's see. Brandon Halam is 13 too high to trade up for Vega. I mean, I think there were some simulations I went through where you had to trade into the top 10 to get the guy, but I think that 13 is probably where you need to be to assure you get him. I don't know if the capital given up would be worthwhile. Not to say that you wouldn't want him on your team, but I don't know if I'd want to trade all that for and the Rams are probably looking to sell that pick. It's not a top 10 pick, and they have shown very clearly that they don't believe picks outside of the top 10 are worth more than good players. So that have already proven it at the pro level. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think that the Rams want good players, and I think that Les Snead and is Les Snead the GM in LA? I'm pretty sure. And then Sean McVay, they want players that are going to contribute right now, and if they don't see that being the case at the pick they're making, they will trade that pick. They're banking on every other team's obsession with the value of the potential of a first-round pick to be enough to give them the ability to get players that are good. They went out and traded for the Chiefs corner Trent McDuffie. Literally, like, would you rather have what pick was that, like 19th? I don't even know. It was their later pick in the draft. Would you rather have like a pick outside of the top 20 in the first round, or would you rather have Trent McDuffie? Because it's like that episode of Family Guy where Peter's like, oh, well, we could have this box could be anything. It could literally be, I don't even remember what he had in the episode, but he's like, this could literally be the exact same thing that we have. Or what was it? I think he won like a boat, and he's like, or you could do this mystery box. And it's like, there could be anything in that mystery box. It could even be a boat. It's like the Rams are like counting on everyone else's being that way so that they can get really good players for their draft picks. So far it's worked. I mean, I think they've been the poster child for how to manage draft capital and leverage it for great players. So good for them. But yeah, with that, we'll have plenty more to talk about next week. So make sure you tune in as the Texans get into their legal tampering, and I think free agency. What day does free agency start exactly? I don't even remember. But I know legal tampering, I believe, is Monday. So we'll get a little more insight into what the Texans are intending to do. Hopefully, we get the O-line acquisitions and free agency out of the way pretty quickly, because there's people who are like, oh, good, we got Dave Montgomery, but without an O-line. It's like, okay, well, it's not even free agency. There's still time. Once time runs out, though, like last offseason, time runs out, no time on the clock, and your O-line additions are Laken Tomlinson, Jake Andrews,
Cam
and
Robinson.
thank God Ariante Ursary. Yeah, there's questions that need to be asked at that point. Other than OL, who else would y'all pick up in free agency? Sorry, I'm trying to bring
Linebacker.
it to an end, but that's a good question. Other than offensive line, I mean, one of the big hot topics in free agency was going to be running back, but I don't think there's any need to make any moves at running back in free agency. I think that a lot of the free agents that I believe the Texans should go after are players that were on the roster last year that are currently not under contract. You got to replace Autry. I don't know if it's defensive tackles. I think re-signing Sheldon Rankins and or Tim Settle, it should be high priority. And then getting after potentially, like, if you want to fill out the blocking tight end issue in free agency, I can't remember the name of the tight end, but there is a guy available who's supposed to be a really good run blocker. So I think that, yeah, once we get a run game in front of CJ, I'm comfortable endorsing this this comment from Houston Stressens. With a run game, it's tough to see us not go anywhere, because then CJ doesn't have the opportunity to throw the ball to the other team 5 times, which is massively beneficial to us winning football games. So
You could have just said he doesn't have to throw the ball as many times. You didn't say
he
the
doesn't
other
have to,
team.
if he doesn't have to throw the ball as many times, the odds of fumbling it 5 times and throwing 5 interceptions are just really low, which bodes well for this Texans team winning games. So, yeah, I don't know, Tom. Final thoughts? Do you have any free agents that you're dying to get on the Texans that are not offensive linemen?
No, not really. I mean, that's like the hot button topic, right? They can just fix the O-line. Everything else is kind of minor in my eyes. I mean, is it Tommy Townsend, somebody they got to get signed? So that's kind of a
Tommy
big deal
Townsend,
too.
and then another one I would say is MJ Stewart for safety depth.
Yeah,
That's
but I
really,
mean, I don't know how hard it would be to bring in another really good punter. So maybe that's something that's kind of important. But I mean, you could draft one too. I don't know. Right now, I think the Texans are in a really good spot. If they bring in the one offensive line piece and draft 2 pieces, I think you call it a win for the offseason.
yeah. And just to answer this question on the tight end position, Tom, while he had 2 tight ends in his mock draft, has not been one that is hugely a believer in the need at the tight end position. And what I'll say is this: there's that one meme where it's like, do you like the tight end for tight end reasons, or do you like him for receiver reasons? And it's like, I feel like a lot of the tight ends the Texans have in the room right now are liked for receiver reasons, especially Dalton Schultz. And so it's not that it's a future need. I think that there's just a specific role that the Texans need to fill in that tight end room, because when you go heavy and you bring in Blake Fisher, and then you also have a tight end on the field who can also run block, that means you now have, 7 guys up front that can clear the way. It's one of the things that would massively benefit this team. So, I mean, like I said earlier, a guy that I really like is Sam Roush in the draft. There's a free agent tight end, and his name eludes me, but if you follow Sideline Sarah, I think she's the one who had posted about it. But getting a tight end who is capable of run blocking, I think, is the big thing, which is why, as much as I love Tanner Koziel, he is more of a developmental prospect out of UH in that regard. Really great at 6'7" as a red zone target, but hasn't quite shown out as a run blocker so far. So I'd love to have him on the team, but I'm looking for a guy who can run block at this point, because that's how you're going to get on the field with Brevin Jordan and Dalton Schultz in front of you, and even Cade Stover. You're going to have to be able to run block. That's going to be the big thing. And I mean, that's affected the receiver room too. There's been times where receivers have been getting less time because they don't want to block. So that's it. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Thanks for being in today. We'll have plenty more to talk about next week. But until then, I have been James Roy. You can find me at James Roy NFL, wherever you get your social media. Tom is TC Tom1 on Instagram and Third Coast Tom on Twitter. And we are the Bullpen. the number one veteran run Texans podcast in the entire known creation that exists right now. And until told otherwise, there's no stats backing that up. I'm just giving a PFF grade of my own to our podcast, and it's 100 out of, number one out of however many. I don't even know how many veteran run Texans podcasts there are, but we're the top of it. So sweet. Oh, and really quickly, Harris County not coming back is depressing because he was so good, but injuries and not seeing the field will do that to you. And I think that's why we need to get a running back a linebacker in this draft, like maybe a Jacob Rodriguez. As always, thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Bullpen. Stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans.